Good evening. I'd like to call to order the special meeting and work session of the Newport News School Board for Tuesday, March 9th, 2022. On behalf of the members of the school board and the superintendent, I welcome each of you present or watching. A quorum is present to transact the business of the school division. We will begin tonight's meeting with the pledge to the flag. I'd like to ask Board Member Rebecca Amon if you would do the honors.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Thank you. You may be seated. We have a shorter agenda than normal for this special meeting. We're now going to move on to Section 2, which is reports and information. And in reports and information, we have item 2.01, which is our proposed FY23 operating budget presentation. Dr. Parker, please take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now we'll present from the dais, from the podium here.
Happy birthday. Should be the third time, I believe. Yeah, it's like the third time.
Mr. Brown, distinguished members of the school board, thank you this evening for allowing me to present the Superintendent's proposed FY 2023 operating budget. And this presentation will capture a lot of the information that we have discussed in work sessions and various meetings, but for public consumption, I want to make sure that we provide some detail that will allow our staff and our families to have a greater knowledge of the budget and the impact the budget will have moving forward for Newport News Public Schools. So tonight, I propose a budget that totals $359.4 million, which represents a $22.6 million increase, or 6.7% increase over the current FY22 operating budget. This budget that I'm presenting this evening will be based on the governor's proposed budget, which was presented in December of 2021. And as we know, and we'll share on the slide here, there are two versions of the House and Senate budgets that are currently under consideration with the General Assembly, which may impact the numbers that are presented this evening for this budget. But for the sake of staying on time with our budget development, we use the governor's proposed budget until we have a firm budget from the state, and then we make the amendments necessary once we have the state figures that will allow us to finalize the budget process. So looking at the budget calendar here, just what has taken place up to this point, we usually begin the budget process in November, and between November and December, we solicit input from various departments, management of our school division, and also community input as well on the needs of the school division. Once that information is gathered and we have the governor's proposed budget, we take a look at the development process and usually engage the school board and City Council in this process as we firm out the estimate of needs based on those budget priorities. So in January, we had a budget planning work session, and in February, we had a public input session, which we did virtually this year and had over 50 plus participants participate in that public input session. We have left a link online for input on the budget from community members and staff. And we also have engaged the city with a joint session, which was conducted earlier this month, to present this information. And I have recently met with the city manager. So tonight I am presenting the superintendent's estimate of needs for the board to consider. And we hope that on March 22nd at the March board meeting, the board will consider this budget and approve it. As always in our planning process, we align our budget priorities with the school division's strategic plan, Journey 2025. We have 5 areas of that plan: student success, student and staff wellness, employee expertise, enhanced partnerships, and stewardship of resources. The other lens we will be looking at tonight as we present this proposed budget will be from the lens of school safety, looking at healthcare, which is a guiding driver in our budget development, the need to continue with our technology initiatives that allow us to manage a one-to-one device initiative in our school division. And also, we always focus on the quality of our learning spaces, which is where we spend some of our capital dollars for continuing to improve the quality of classrooms and other spaces in our schools. As I mentioned earlier, the second column here is the governor's proposed budget, which was released in December of 2021. If we calculate the changes in the bottom column, the bottom row of this chart here is the impact of each one of those proposed budgets on Newport News Public Schools. So the proposed budget that we're basing this presentation tonight on would have a $19.8 million impact based on the governor's proposed budget in December of 2021. The House's version of the budget, which has been released, the impact of that budget would be a revenue increase of $16 million, and the Senate proposed budget would have a positive impact of $27 million. We know that crossover, when the House and Senate sends their budget across, took place recently. Neither budget was approved, and they're in negotiation at this point, and we are hoping that we will have a firm budget from the House, from the state, in the next few days. Just a quick look at these columns here and what each budget entailed, and how this will impact Newport News and our operating budget for FY23. All three budgets have a raise included, which is a good thing. The governor's proposed budget has a 5% raise for each of the biennium, for each year of the biennium, FY23 and FY24. The House version of the budget has a 4% raise with a 1% bonus each year of the biennium, FY23 and FY24. So that would be 4% in FY23 with a 1% bonus, and then 4% in FY24 with a 1% bonus. The Senate version of the budget sticks with the 5% raise for each year of the biennium for FY23 and 24, and a one-time bonus of $1,000, and that's in June of FY23, and I think, Mr. Brown, that clears up where we were talking about. That would be next year in FY23. Okay. They also, if you look at the Virginia Preschool Initiative, the governor's budget proposed an increase in per pupil rate for a preschool from $7,655 to $8,359, and then the House stuck with that recommendation, and the Senate. So hopefully we'll see an increase in dollars related to preschool. The VRS rate was recommended to maintain the same. Now, usually in years where we see an increase in VRS, that is a significant budget impact. But since they were leaving that rate the same at 16.62%, that's a good thing. We will not see that impact our budget any further at this particular point over this biennium. Early reading initiatives. The governor's budget proposed to increase funding to include 4th and 5th grades, which would allow for additional staff and resources to support reading initiatives at the 4th and 5th grade levels. Last year, the House, the state budget did support earlier grades, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade reading initiatives. So we're glad to see that continue to be recommended. The House budget is sticking with that. The Senate budget provides a fund for reading specialists for every 550 students in grades K through 3, with flexibility to work with grades 4 through 6 students. So they're using a calculation based on per student ratio to determine how many reading specialists would be provided. What we were waiting to see was whether there was a hold harmless for ADM. We'll talk about enrollment during this presentation, and we have had an enrollment decrease over the past 2 years during the pandemic. The governor's budget recommends holding harmless schools for this year, for next year for the ADM decreases due to the pandemic. So funding is provided for the elimination of sales tax. Now, there's two things in this piece here. There's a hold harmless for the grocery tax because, as you know, Governor Youngkin eliminated the grocery tax. Some of that tax revenue went towards schools. So they're holding us harmless in this proposed budget by making sure that schools do not lose revenue because of that decision. And also looking at benchmarking due to COVID-19, which affects ADM, the loss of students. The House and the Senate are supporting that recommendation, so we feel confident that will come through. And then the last item is there's the at-risk add-on. The governor's budget increased the rate from 26 to 49.5% in FY23, and then leveled it out at 36% in FY24. So we should see additional revenue coming for at-risk students. The at-risk add-ons supports our most vulnerable students. We should see additional revenue coming out of all three of those budgets are supporting that. So when we look at this table here, and this table started off pretty empty at the beginning, we know that we're anticipating, based on the governor's budget, an increase of $19.8 million, and that's the figure that we're using to present this budget to you this evening. That is a moving target. That number may change as the state finalizes their budget. But for tonight's purposes, we have balanced the budget using that additional revenue. Additionally, meeting with the city manager, I have a firm commitment from the city manager to include in her proposed budget, city budget, a $2.8 million increase for Newport News Public Schools in operating revenue. So with that, two of those items, we should see we're anticipating a $22.6 million increase in revenue based on the information we have this evening. So I wanted to put some state trend in there for context, because it's always good to give our public context about what we're seeing in terms of that. So over the past years, we had seen some significant reductions due to a recession back in 2009, which lowered the amount of state revenue, and we really struggled through those times. But as we've seen over the past years, the state has continued to increase revenue to schools, and the state revenue makes up almost 60+% of our budget. So as we continue to see state revenue increase, it impacts our bottom line in a positive way. We also this year have seen that our local composite index change, which lowered to 2.2808 from 0.2842. And the lower our composite index goes, the more state revenue we actually receive. So the local composite index, for those who may not know, is basically a measure that the state uses that calculates a locality's wealth. So they have reduced our local composite index by a few points from 0.2842 to 0.2808, and we see that we have a fairly large state increase this year as part of that, the factor of the LCI going down. At the state side, or from the locality side, and the locality makes up about 30 to 35% of our operating revenue. This is just a view of the actual dollars in the budget. It doesn't count debt service, but with that $2.8 million projected proposed increase, we can see that we would see an increase from $113.4 million in operating revenue to $116.2 million in operating revenue. So let's get into enrollment and just enrollment trends. We have to pay attention to enrollment, because basically the number of students determine how our state revenue plays out. Now, over the past 2 years, before the pandemic in FY20, we were usually, our average ADM was around 27,249. First year of the pandemic, we saw a significant loss to students. The state did not held us harmless for that loss of students over the pandemic in FY21 and FY22. So we are pleased to see that it is proposed to continue to hold harmless for ADM, and hopefully we'll see the enrollment increases go back to the trend line as we move out of the pandemic. But for the sake of building this budget, we used a number of 25,662 students. That would allow us to have a more accurate budget. Should we see additional students come, the state normally will give you more money. If more students come than your proposed number that you're using to build your budget, the state will increase your revenue in roughly around the fourth quarter of the year to compensate for that increase in ADM. Okay, so it's not something that you would be penalized for by using a lower number. The state typically calculates your ADM by March 30th of each year, and depending on where you are, they'll adjust your revenue accordingly. This year we're being held harmless for ADM due to the pandemic. So just special populations, I'll quickly go through here just to see that our special needs population has not changed much. We did see a decrease over the of some students due to the pandemic, down from 1,400 roughly to 1,047, and then we've remained fairly consistent from that point. Again, we hope to see that number move more back to the trend line as we move out of the pandemic. And I'm sorry, this is pre-K and VPI and pre-K SPED. So this is not a total special needs population. This is VPI, which are our younger students, and our pre-K SPED students. English language learners, pandemic or not, they continue to come. So we continue to see a higher number of English language learners. This year we're projecting an addition of 89 students, and as we look at our budget development, you'll see that we're continuing to add resources towards our ELL population to accommodate for the growth in population. So that number is continuing to rise, and we're continuing to add services each year. And a shout out to our team, who just won the Magna Award for excellence in service to students. But this year was social emotional, but we won the Magna Award 3 years ago for our ELL population. So shout out to our programs and the support we provide English language learners. And this is our special needs population. So these are our special needs students, and we can see that there still was a pandemic impact, and you still see that we're starting to see enrollment go back up for special needs populations as we move out of the pandemic. Okay. So the first area of our budget I want to focus on is student success, because that's a very important part of our budget. We obviously want to prioritize ways that will increase student outcomes and addressing the needs of our students. So this year we are targeting in this budget, the FY23 budget, to continue to increase ESL teachers. Seeing the projected growth. We want to match that growth and make sure we keep the teacher-student ratio down so that those classes do not get too large. The state provides some level of resources for that, but we want to continue to focus on supports. We also want to look to see with bilingual teaching assistants, teaching assistants in classrooms who may speak multiple languages to support our in-class environments. Because we also have, in addition to having students, ELL students who receive services, we have ELL students who exit the program. And when they exit the program, they are still ELL students, they just have reached a certain level. And it might be helpful to have bilingual educators in the buildings to support students in their classroom environments. So that's another service. The assessment specialist is also a support position for ELL, making sure that those students are doing well in their assessments and we're tracking their progress. We also are continuing to add resources that will provide tiered support for students in math, science, social studies, and advanced courses as well. And we want to continue to focus on our class sizes at the early elementary literacy and math areas. We will continue to see increases in, and one of the things we know is that we're not able to fill all of our VPI positions this year because of a lack of teachers. So, but that was not because of a lack of students' interest or families who have applied. So we want to continue to be able to provide additional teachers and resources so that we can continue to add students on while keeping those class sizes at a manageable level. Largest area of our budget will always be compensation, and the focus on compensation will always be the bottom line because we need to attract, retain, and quality teachers, bus drivers, and other things. So I'll spend a little bit of time talking about our compensation plan and what we hope to accomplish this year with our compensation objectives. It is our top priority, and it is where we spend the majority of our money. When we look at our compensation priorities, Newport News must have a market competitive compensation rate that attracts and retains the best staff. As you'll see on a slide following this, right now we do provide the greatest level of compensation for teachers on the peninsula. And it's important that we stay there because we're also the largest school division on the peninsula, and we are in the middle of a teacher shortage. So with that being said, retaining our staff, attracting great staff is very important to us. So our goals this year, and I want to point out the difference between just a straight 5% and what we have done traditionally over the past 3 to 4 years. We provide a flat general salary increase, which, as you see on this slide, is 5%, which is the state recommending, and they're paying for a part of that, which are just the SOQ positions. To give everyone a 5% raise costs about $13 million. That exceeds what the state is providing us on each year of the biennium. But in addition to that, we also work on salary compression. So you also see another $2.2 million there, which we have done specifically over the last 3 years, working on the decompression of our scales. But what that means is that our employees don't necessarily receive just a 5% raise over the past 3 years. They've received a range, right? So the range this year is still in the area of 5.2 to 7%, with an average raise of 6.5% for teachers, okay? And we've done that the last 3 years. So our raise last year was 5%, but that did not mean that everyone received a 5% raise. That range was still between 5, I think it went as high as 7.7 last year, in some cases with teachers. So that's decompressing our scales. If you recall, we're decompressed our scales from year 12 up to 30. This year we're focused on years 6 through 11. Okay, and that will allow those teachers to have a larger reach. So that's where the additional 2.2 comes in. Then we're also looking at adding another 100,000 to increase the starting teacher pay. And we've noticed that the only area of our salary compensation scale that we continue to work on is entry-level teachers and making sure that we're very competitive there. So we are looking at increasing that entry-level pay at this time between from 47 to 50 million, 50,000. I think everybody works here. I think I'd go back and teach to 50,000
million.
And that we believe that will keep us remain competitive in the regional market for entry level positions. Again, I'll reiterate to our teachers who are listening tonight that we are the highest paying employer on the peninsula for teachers, and our average raise will be 6.5%. with a range between 5 and 7%, which has traditionally been the case over the past few years, which is why we've given significant raises to remain competitive. We want to adjust the minimum starting pay to $15 per hour for our lowest paid employees, but we also are focusing specifically on bus drivers, positions like bus drivers and custodians and teacher assistants this year to make sure that they have a competitive wage, because we are seeing some competitors now outside of education who are attracting our staff, and I'll show you tonight where we are going to be very competitive against those employers. So when we look at where we are right now, as I mentioned here, we hire teachers on a bachelor's degree or master's degree. When you look at the peninsula, we are the highest paying employer on the peninsula in most areas, except with master's degrees in the area of entry level, zero teachers. And we hope to address that this year. So we hope to be the highest paying employer across the board of this scale as we make some adjustments to our salary scales this year. So that's the focus, and I believe our compensation strategy will allow us to continue to work on that and maintain that, what we have gained over the past few years. In areas of retaining bus drivers, we have made significant progress. When you look over the last few years in terms of bus driver salaries, we have made some significant progress. In 2018, we were doing very well, but then we looked and everyone wanted to catch up. So we had to do a little bit more. And as you can see in 2020, FY 2020 and 2021, we exceeded starting salary of 15 in the FY 2021 budget for bus drivers. But in terms of our current year, well, we went up to 1580 with the salary increase they received last year. We still have divisions that are making a concerted effort to make it a very competitive process for bus drivers. So we want to do a little bit more, and we'll address that this evening. So one of the things we did for research for the board was who are our competitors outside of public education? Who are we competing against to retain bus drivers, custodians, cafeteria workers, teaching assistants? We have to keep in mind that we are in an area where many of our businesses and educators, we're seeing lack of employees, and it's becoming very competitive to attract employees. So when you look here, you're seeing some of the entry-level positions for Amazon, FedEx, UPS, other areas, and we're looking in the $17 to $19 range in some of those areas as being where we see entry-level positions. So how are we planning to compete? We're going to exceed it. We're just going to blow past it and make salary starting salary for bus drivers not an issue at least for the foreseeable future. We're already paying a starting salary this year of $15.80. That makes the midpoint for a bus driver who's been with us for 15 years. Their current range would probably be around $20.97. Their max would be $27.30. So what is our recommendation? Based on making our lowest paid employees a minimum of $15, we had to incrementally increase all other employees and bus drivers included. So their starting salary this year for a bus driver, starting hourly rate, not salary, would be $20.16. The mid would be for those drivers who are currently with us anywhere between 6 to 14 years, may see as high as $26.76. And the max, if we approve this budget, would be for bus drivers who've been driving with us for 15 or more years, $34.83. Okay, so that's how you address that escalation. And then the key would be in the years to come to maintain that by making sure we're continuing to look at our competitors around the area, and we're continuing to make adjustments to our bus drivers. We cannot run a division without bus drivers, teacher assistants, custodians, cafeteria workers, all of those valuable employees, and we are making similar adjustments to make sure the minimum starting salary goes to $15, and there will be incremental increases associated with those positions. So I gave two examples in this slide because this slide will be available to staff and to the community as well, just to see what it looks like with an employee who is 5 years salary. Their current hourly wage is $17.27. If we apply just the 5%, it goes to $18.39. But we know we do experience adjustments. Same thing with teachers, and it's the same effect. So the experience adjustments, when you give them the value, adjust their value based on their years of experience, brings their salary, their hourly rate up to $22.47. So that would be an example where we're spending money where we need to spend it to make sure that we can be solvent and be whole moving forward. And I think that would be a great draw for, if the board considers this budget, will be a great draw for maintaining the employees we have, but also attracting new employees who would work in our school divisions for an hourly wage. So the other areas we're focused on in terms of employees is building our own, is growing our own employees, making sure that we have a premier employee workforce, making sure that we have great professional development. But what we found is that coaching is very important for teachers as well and for staff. It's not just getting them in the classroom. How do you support them while they're in the classroom with mentors, with coaching, with the resources that they need? So we need to continue to invest in that. And we've not only targeting that with CARES Act funding, but we're also continuing to target that in our operating budget as well. We're looking at providing employees additional employee tuition reimbursement. Right now, our employee tuition reimbursement, and I'm going by memory here, is $600 per semester reimbursed. And we're proposing to increase that to $2,000. So, and that's with the past class, making sure they passed the class, submitted their information, so that employee working with Newport News, similar to when I was a teacher, could go to school, afford to take classes, get reimbursed, use that reimbursement to pay for the next semester, and you go from having a bachelor's degree to a master's degree to a doctorate, right? But making sure that we invest in our employees because we need that educated workforce in order to better serve our students. Launching career advancement training programs. We have some already. We're going to continue to work on ways that we can grow our own employees, and we're going to invest in them to make sure that we can have our next hourly worker in our school division. If they want to become a teacher, if they want to become working in a clerical field, whatever it may be, we want to have pathways where employees can look for advancement in our school division and provide some of the resources they would need to get there. So, looking into area of student and staff wellness, we've been, and I will go back to the Magna Award at this time and say that we have recently won a national award for our services in the area of social, emotional, and physical well-being. And we started this path with the board a few years ago by starting to invest in clinically licensed social workers and psychologists. And we started saying we need more of these professionals who are working not only outside of the special needs area, but also providing direct service to students and families. And we're continuing to invest in that. We are one of the only divisions in the state that does so. And we recently submitted for a national award, the Magna Award, and we were silver recipients of that award for the services we provide students in that area. It is one of the best things I think we do in Newport News, and it was timely because we started this investment before the pandemic, and it has served us well. But we still have a lot of students who are on waiting lists, who are still waiting to see their mental health therapists. Sometimes it takes a while to get there. We would like to continue to expand those services and continue to work with local partners also that we partner with. But we believe that we continue to invest in this area until we have enough to distribute across the school division to provide that service and meet students' needs in a timely way. We can only improve from there. Another big item in this area is going to be expanding middle school sports. We would like to add football, wrestling, boys and girls soccer, and to make cheerleading at the middle school an actual sport. We do have cheerleading at the middle school, but I think it's more of a kind of a club type activity. And really work with those to build coaches, build student athletes, and increase the expectations as we would at the high school. Allowing them to work with our high school student athletes, it builds a lot of leadership development. It allows students to lead healthy lifestyles, make great choices at the middle school level. And it's a great draw for families who want to see their students engaged in some activities and to be able to compete at a younger age. So we are very interested in expanding middle school sports, and we have planted the investment in this budget to support that. So I talked about the cost of that, and roughly the first year is really nominal. It's really assessing our bleachers, lighting, fields. Where do we get athletic trainers from? Coaching stipends. We have to. Next year we will be in the process of hiring coaches, referees, uniforms. There's a lot of detail that has to take place, so we need that seed money. I believe this cost may go up a little bit in future years as we start to play. But we want to have the dollars necessary to make sure we're ready and in a good position and it's well planned out so that we can have students compete in a safe way. Area that we focused on is school safety, and that's becoming even more across the nation. We have to continue to work on that. We do have a need at Huntington as we continue to expand Huntington by adding another grade level next year. We want to have a solely designated middle school security officer for the Huntington school. We want to continue to work on intercom and security cameras upgrades. We have continued to do this over many years in the division, upgrading our intercom and security camera systems. And then also making sure that we have both stand, alone, and wand metal detection for random searches and other necessary needs on each of our campuses as needed to make sure that we can maintain a safe environment in our schools. Technology, in balancing the budget, we've kind of leveled out 2.7 and 2.7 in the area of technology and capital. And we'll talk about how we balance this budget in a moment. But one of these numbers went down 100,000. But we still feel we have the key items we want to make sure we focus on. Looking at continuing to look at our student computers, our network infrastructure, access to STEM cards, iPads, iPods for the younger kids, and then also networks and security. Now that we have all of this, we have to maintain it, and that will be at a cost. A lot of it's covered in CARES Act funding. But we are continuing to look at, okay, where can we use operating dollars to continue to support our technology, our one-to-one technology, and our infrastructure and technology moving forward. Operating and maintenance, level both of them again out at 2.7 and 2.7. So where we have the metal detectors, the security cameras, those items already accounted for in these dollars, and again, that's under school safety. But then on the bottom area with the 1.7 is electrical, HVAC, carpentry, and flooring. We have taken some items out of this list to make sure that we balance the budget. So there were some plumbing items and some other things that we have moved, and we are deferring those. We're not saying they won't get done, but we're deferring those items to make sure we use other available funds other than planning those in this operating budget. But we had to, in order to balance the budget, we had to make sure that some areas were cut. So other things we're looking at, enhanced partnerships. We're bringing back field trips and exploratory activities for kids, getting them out of the buildings. It's time for kids to learn, to get out in the world and make sure they're seeing some of the great things that we have to offer in not only this area, but around the state and around the nation. So we are going to make sure that we have opportunities for students to have field trips, both virtual and travel, making sure we have the resources, schools have the resources to plan those and make sure they are supportive of our curriculum and expand the opportunities of our curriculum. So that's something we are targeting in this budget. Under Stewardship of Resources, we always want to make sure that we are maintaining our technology, and these are aligned items with the strategic plan, just putting them in the right bucket. Acquiring the materials and supplies to support academic initiatives and address learning loss. We want to be good stewards of our money in this budget. I think the biggest thing we've done in this area under Stewardship of Resources is every position that we're targeting for adding this year to our operating budget, we made it budget neutral by repurposing current existing FTEs in our budget. I think there's nothing probably more fiscally resourceful than doing that. is to add the positions we need, repurpose positions at zero additional dollars on our to our operational budget. So that's the biggest item that's not listed there, but I think that really speaks to the work that our budget team is doing to build this budget. So what are the staffing requests? I just kind of, so we look at 18, we have 18 positions that we're considering adding in FY 2023, and the net cost is $0 because we're repurposing existing unfilled FTEs in our budget. And that by doing that, as we saw, we had some lower student numbers. Our student enrollment is trending down at this particular time, so it allowed us to do that in a very conservative way. But it will allow us not to add that I think it was $1.2 million to this operating budget because of those repurposed FTEs. And those positions, just to go through the list to see how aligned they are, we're talking about the assessment specialists. Attendance is going to continue to be a very important piece. Chronic absenteeism is real in Newport News and in other places. And coming out of the pandemic, we need more interaction, more active engagement. So we found a need for an additional support from an attendance officer. We talked about the bilingual teacher assistants. Looking at providing HR some additional support for all the programs that they have and partnerships and other things initiatives that they're implementing. Looking at continuing to support technology through staffing with an infrastructure specialist, instructional tech coordinator. And we're also looking at improving looking at testing, mental health therapists we talked about. Our record specialists are part-time, so that one is really making 2 part-time positions a full-time. So that's an increase. There's not adding one. Adding a school guidance counselor based on our criteria. School security officer for, again, Huntington Middle School, and a student support specialist to continue to provide that great mental health support in our schools. So total of 18 positions that were identified through the budget development process, which we feel we can manage with a net zero budget impact. Okay. So getting into health benefits, that's the other area we really needed to focus on, because that's the other area that's going to impact and continue to impact our bottom line moving forward. And what we have to say about health costs is there was a impact with the pandemic, and we did see an increase in premiums. And as premiums increase, we have to continue. We'll normally get an additional, as claims increase, we'll normally get an increase in premiums for the next year. We are a single source or a fully sourced school division for health insurance, which means we have to maintain a healthy fund balance to cover all of our claims. And in order to remain solvent, usually the school division and employees will cover the costs or increases in premium hikes. Over the past few years, the school division has taken care of all of the premium increases and have not passed those costs on to employees. We have to continue to look at reasonable ways to maintain a healthy insurance process. So we want to make sure this year we are going to ask that we split that cost with employees to make sure that we can remain solvent with our health insurance. And it's a good year because over the next 2 years, we are looking at over a 10% baseline, 10% increase in compensation for employees. And as you know how we do, it might be for some employees, it might be as high as 12 to 14%. So with that being said, we feel that passing costs on, some of the costs on to employees will not be an overburden their bottom line or their pockets. So what is the impact? I know employees will ask that, and I'll probably get that question about 20 times after this presentation. The most popular plan for our employees to take is the employee only or single employee. That's where most 60% of our employees choose that option and pay for their premium. So we've calculated that the overall impact would be an approximately $30 to $35 per month increase for those employees. Now, obviously, if you add children or you do the family plan, the cost may vary and be a little different based on that plan. But for 60% of those employees who do access our insurance as a single employee, $30 to $35 is the rough impact of that, versus anywhere up to a $3,900 salary increase in year one of this budget. Okay. So with that being said, I think we're recommending that we do have that $1.5 million total of the $3.7 million increase, 1.5 covered by employee health premium increases, the division covered the other portion. Okay. So that's just a slide, just reiterating what I was saying here. And over the past few years, just important for our employees and our families to know that over the past few years, 2014 to 2019, we haven't made any changes to employee. From that standpoint, 2016, we did a 10% increase for employee premium changes. We reduced employee premiums 15% in 2017. And gave a 3-month premium holiday from December 2017 to February 28. But since that time, we have not passed on any additional costs for premiums to employees. Okay, so getting back to the revenue, and I'm nearing the end of this budget. Getting back to this original slide, we just talked about this number. The 19.8, again, will be determined by the General Assembly. That 19.8 could go as high as, if the Senate's budget is the most popular, or it could be lowered a little bit by the House's version. So we do have a firm commitment from the city manager to propose a $2.8 million increase in our operating revenue. Based on that figure of 19.8, our target number of increase for this year is 22.6. And what I say to the board tonight is, that's what we're living with right now until we get any additional numbers from the state. So anything else that comes out between now and March 22nd, we'll obviously make an adjustment. But the 22.6 increase is what we have calculated these additions based on. And we have balanced this budget. Okay, I included the pie charts here. I think you've seen those standard charts for the FY23 budget. So just showing where our revenue comes from. The state usually is our largest revenue provider. 60 in this budget, proposed budget, their increase would make their state revenue 66.3% of our budget. That's an increase. It's the largest increase we've seen in a while. The city has increased their revenue by $2.8 million. Their revenue would be 32.3% of our budget. We get a small percent from the state, roughly around 3.1%. Other sources around 0.9%. But the majority of our revenue of that $359.4 million budget would be from state revenue. And these other slides just show where the money is spent. So they are more just showing that the majority of our dollars are spent on personnel. 259.9% of our budget is spent on personnel and personnel who support instructional services, right? Which is where it should be. Transportation, operations and maintenance, facilities and debt, technology, but admin, attendance, and health, roughly about 6.2% of our budget is administration, attendance, and health related. Staffing, 50% of our staffing is our teachers, and that number right there does not count teachers, instructional staff, or support staff who are paid through grants, right? So we do have staff who are paid through grant services, awarded grants as well, which is why the number of employees we have is much higher than the numbers reflected there. But the budgeted FTEs is 3,861.5. Okay, that does not include grants. So with that being said, I'm going to move forward, and this is just broken down by, you've seen this slide before, broken down by the strategic plan. What are the areas of the strategic plan and where do we support that with actual staffing and supports? Under student success, academic services, 65% of that budget relates to student success and providing academic services. Employee expertise, that's 4.9%. Partnerships, 2.2%. Stewardship of resources, roughly 20% of our budget there. And staff and wellness, we can attribute 6.7% of our budget to that. So this slide is probably one of the most important ones because this is how we balanced it. And if our revenue changes, we'll have to go back and continue to get to zero, right? 22.6 is increase in revenue. We have to make sure that our needs are the money that the additions to the budget do not exceed that 22.6 right now, at this particular point. How do we do that? If you look at the column there, there's the cost of the 5% general increase, $13 million. There's the cost of our compression adjustments, or experience adjustments, you may call it, $2.2 million. The increase in teacher starting pay, going to increasing that to make sure we have a very competitive entry-level teaching pay. Adjusting to $15 an hour for all employees, $2.8 million. handling the compression or experience adjustments for classified staff, $3.5 million. There's that big investment in bus drivers, custodians, cafeteria workers, teacher assistants, making sure that we also do experience adjustments there that makes their salaries more competitive, their hourly wages more competitive. When we look at the continuing down that first column, the health plan increase was $3.7 million. And then when we look at technology and capital, 2.7 and 2.7. And then we have the 0.8 for middle school athletics. Okay? All of that totaled $31.5 million, right? To balance it, we had to look at where was some of the money that we could actually pull from in our current operational budget to lower that number to 22.6. We calculated that we are going to have a lot of some turnover this year. With that's when a 31-year teacher or staff member retires, and you hire another teacher, right? So that's the attrition and turnover. So turnover and attrition, roughly about 4.2 million. We can calculate in there as to balance the cost of the additional cost of that budget. And then we look at the employee share of the healthcare premium, $1.5 million, and then a one-time cost and department reductions of 3.2. That's just looking around our departments. Unspent revenue in this budget. Okay, where can we trim the fat? Okay, where can we pull dollars to make sure that we can compensate or reallocate or repurpose? $3.2 million. It allowed us to get that number, $8.9 million, that would go towards balancing the budget. And we are set right now at 22.6. Okay. So the only thing that would change this at this particular time, or if the board adds any discussion and there are any changes on your end, or the state comes through with additional revenue, right? And then we would go back and we would keep the board informed between now and that time of any changes that come from that situation. Okay. So tonight, I have two asks. One is for the board to consider approving the FY 2023 proposed budget of $359.4 million at the March 22nd school board meeting. And I have an additional request tonight of the board to consider using unspent revenue in FY 22, now that we know that there will be some level of whole harness that comes out of the General Assembly this year for ADM. We do have some additional revenue that we can put towards employee bonuses. And I would propose that we use that unspent revenue in FY 22 to provide a $1,000 raise for all eligible full-time employees and $500 for eligible part-time employees. And if the board considers that at the March 22nd board meeting, we will expedite that bonus for employees. I base that recommendation because a lot of our employees are doing a lot more this year because of a lack of some staff, right? So when we have less bus drivers, the ones we have to work harder. We have less personnel in the building. The personnel in the building have to work harder. We have provided some compensation, but all situations do not qualify for compensation. This would allow us to reward our employees for having a tough year, but also showing that we value them, that we respect the work that they're currently doing under circumstances, and that we want them to continue working with Newport News Public Schools and consider this a division that cares about the work that they're doing for students. So with that being said, the next steps in the process is March 15th. Mr. Chairman, the board will have a public hearing on the proposed budget. We will have information online regarding tonight's presentation, so we believe our community will be informed. And the school board meeting on March 22nd is when the board will consider this request. And Mr. Chairman, that concludes my presentation. At this point, I would be happy to answer any questions, myself or my very talented staff, at this time.
All right. Questions from the board? Yes, Ms. Amon.
I guess I'm not sure if it's two questions or one. It's kind of on teaching and class size and that sort of thing. I was looking through the report about notes from the state as far as class sizes depending on the schools and needs in the school. Different schools have different preferred class sizes, and I wanted to, and maybe I don't know who can speak to this, but the comment on when we've switched from some full-time employees, positions that aren't being filled,
to ones that are filling. Some that are being filled aren't necessarily, say, a teacher in a classroom. So how are we doing as far as class size? Do we feel we still have enough for that while shifting the full-time employees over to these new positions? And then I had a question on the proposals coming out of the House and Senate and the governor's budget on reading specialists, so that we can, and so that I can have a better understanding of the impact. One proposal had to do with adding grades 4 and 5, and then the other one adjusted the numbers, but not knowing what the current numbers are, reading specialists per students from 1 through 3. It's a little bit hard to get a paradigm.
We can get that to you because I haven't seen the exact breakdown of what those numbers would be based on that ratio. I know we did it for counselors a few years ago when we lowered the ratio to 250 across the board per counselor. We looked at where we were in consideration of that. I'll be happy to get that information to you. The other piece is that the FTEs that we used to repurpose were historically unfilled FTEs. So we're not cutting into something by lowering the number of staff that we're in actually filled positions historically. So we will look over the last few years, and if we see that we had a set number in a certain class that continued to be unfilled, we look there first because it doesn't impact our bottom line today. So that's where we're getting those FTEs from. But that's a very good question, and we can actually look at our staff positions to see what the breakdown would be in terms of that Senate version. I think it was the Senate version that broke it down to 550.
It went by number of students.
550
versus,
per. We'll look at that number and see how many that would equate to, and where we actually stand with that. I'll as a follow-up, I'll send that back out to the board.
Okay.
Other questions? Yeah, Mr. Harris.
John had it on.
Oh, Mr. Ely.
I just want to say thank you for the major adjustments in pay. I was at Wawa the other day just talking to the cashier. I said, hey, how much you make? I said he was hired. And she said he's starting off at 15. She said, but I make $17.86. I said, $17.86. And that just kind of surprised me. I said, as a school division, we have to compete with Wawa's and other places that was once at $9 to $10 an hour, near at $17 an hour. So I definitely think that we are on the cutting edge to say, hey, we're not going to deal with all these major corporations that's coming to our city, taking up our employees. We're going to jump up front. We're going to jump ahead of it instead of nickel and dime the situation. So,
Right.
So I definitely think that's amazing. Also excited about the middle school sports. I was at the One City Marathon event over the weekend, and a parent came up to me, was so excited about the middle school sports. But her son said, can you please ask if they can add tennis and golf? So maybe if the money isn't available in the budget, maybe a few years or down the road, or I don't know if it's available this year, he was definitely interested in tennis and golf. And my last question is, with the contracts for reimbursement for going back to school, is there a certain amount of years that the employee have to sign a contract, say, hey, we do reimbursement, you must be with Newport News 2 or 3 more years?
Now that we are working out details for specific things, if we pay for that employee to get that diploma, that degree, then yes, there will be a service obligation. If it's a split cost, we're looking at just providing the service to allow for the employee to continue to work through to afford additional education. But Mrs. Farish is here. Did you want to add to anything there that I'm missing, or?
No, that's correct.
Okay, so if we pay for Mr. Ely to go to school and get a master's degree in mathematics, then yes, there will be at least a minimum 3-year service obligation for us to pay for that, because we're investing in you. We want you to come back and teach advanced courses for us, whatever it may be. There would be an investment there. If you are in our tuition reimbursement program and you're paying for your tuition and books, that money will not cover all of your expenses. Then as long as you're making that B grade or higher, we would continue to allow the tuition reimbursement to come through as a benefit for you being a Newport News Public School employee.
That's really good. And last thing, the bonuses that you would do, the one-time bonuses, what would make an employee ineligible to receive that $1,000 or $500?
There are certain employees that may not be eligible based on their position, and I think substitutes would probably be, but long-term subs we're considering because they're filling a teaching vacancy there, and then they're I can't think of any other else off the top of my head, but I'll leave HR for that. But employees who contract with us, all will. So there's
Okay.
only a small percentage who would not be eligible.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Yeah. Thank you,
Mr.
Doctor.
Harris.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the briefing. Or how can I put it? I discussed with a couple of people. I think I was about briefed out or meeting out, but for some strange reason, the delivery, was perfect. I think, and I was able to, follow you and understand. A couple of questions. The bonuses. Do employees have other options? So if I didn't want to take the $500 bonus or the $1,000 bonus in lieu of, say, 20 hours of annual leave or 40 hours of annual leave or a combination thereof, have you all considered anything like that?
We haven't, but I'll talk to.
We'll chalk that one out.
I'll talk to my staff about it.
I get that
We
one.
have not. We have
I
not.
understand that. That one's free.
Usually, door number one is a very good door.
Right. Right. No, it's just one of those things. And the
Yeah.
reason I said it, some employees may, value, time off
yeah.
versus the $1,000.
We'll definitely bring that
Okay.
back. And I want to reiterate, we gave a bonus, not last year, the year before, and it was pre-taxed. This will not be a pre-taxed. Our estimate of $6 million is if it's $1,000, it will be $1,000 in your pocket.
Yeah. Yeah. Just keep that in
So
mind.
that was something we did, and I found that it's still money in the pocket, but I think it just means more if you say you're getting a bonus for $1,000, you actually see it with $1,000.
And I'm sure there's regulations probably at the state, or whatever.
Well, we have to pay the taxes. We would pay the taxes on it. And
Right.
that's the only piece that we would have to factor in.
So that's an important point, that it's going to be $1,000 in the employees' pockets.
Yes.
That's after taxes. So that means we're paying the taxes for them, so it's not going to be $750 or some lower amount.
Exactly.
$1,000 in their pocket.
Exactly.
Right.
I think our employees deserve it, and they've worked hard for us this year. It's been last 2 to 3 years. It's been very. It's been getting through this pandemic, and I just believe it would spread a lot of goodwill.
Yeah,
On
I mean,
a lot of levels.
again, it will, but I'm sure there's probably employees that will probably say, if they offer 20 hours of annual leave, I'm going to take it, or or whatever. And just maybe just because they're in the teaching profession, they may not have the time to do it during the school year, or they may. Who knows? If we had enough employees, they actually could. So just one of them things to check on. And,
Well, we'll definitely take a look at it.
okay, thanks. The next one. And I don't know if Pat brought this up or what, but I was thinking of the shipyard contractors, defense contractors, that come in and work at the shipyard, and they have, most of them have DOD CAT ID cards too, because they have to get in on the facilities. Some of them have secret clearances, so majority of them fall under the DOD regulations. Have we entertained the thought of, and this, I'm sure it's at the state level or even the national level, to, if they have children that come to school, to be counted under the federal supportive program versus just, teachers, or just instead of employees at Fort Uses or Langley or whatever. So I think we're missing, or probably could be missing, an opportunity to count those individuals.
Well, I know it is a requirement to, and DOD children of DOD families does count in that calculation.
Yes.
And we do receive those funds every year.
Right, correct.
And I would ask Scarlett. I know it's military connected youth, but also
Yeah.
DOD families.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a housing thing, but let me.
Well, yeah, it's because say for instance, whether it's a DOD civilian employee, if their children still count, but the shipyard it's another entity, but they
Yeah.
fall under DOD.
Now, the shipyard I'd have to check on because
Right,
I
well,
know
that's what I mean. I
they
know the rest of
serve-
them.
They're not necessarily DOD employees. They're Huntington Ingalls employees.
Right.
But we'd have to check the criteria to see if they qualify for federal aid.
Correct.
And what you're talking about is impact aid.
Correct.
And whether shipyard families or students of shipyard personnel would count towards impact aid.
Correct.
And that's something we can look into. We
Okay,
currently
sure.
collect for DOD employees
Yeah, I know,
and
I know. Yeah.
military connected youth.
So who knows? We might be missing a group.
There's a qualification.
Yeah, we might be
We'll-
missing a group
yeah.
or something. Who knows?
So it's worth looking, and we don't want to miss any additional revenue that we should be collecting. We definitely want to make sure we take advantage of that.
Correct. I think field trips are important. I mean, when I was that age, we went on a lot of field trips, and I call it the comparison gene is turned on when a child is have only seen one thing, and they get on a bus and they travel up 64, they go wherever the case may be, and that child immediately starts to compare present existence to what they see, and at an early age, it's very impactful. So thank you for implementing that. It can change lives without you even knowing it. So I think that
we really like to make sure that it's not a barrier for our students or families, and that the cost is not too high on families for certain things like admissions and those kind of things. And transportation is usually, depending on where you're going, if it's chartered. So we want to make sure that's not a barrier for our kids.
Right. Well, even just inside the city, they would be able to see something different.
Yes, sir.
The middle school sports, I think it's a home run. I know it is, because it's going to save those kids that normally would probably fall through the cracks, not all, but some. And I think we have a lot of professional athletes that came from the 757 that is probably going to be interested in sponsoring a middle school, supporting a middle school. So some of the things such as uniforms and equipment, there's a possibility we probably could, get that supplemented through some individuals that, really wants to participate and, start in middle school sports in Newport News. So just keep that in mind when we start talking, monies and budgets or where we're going to get it from. So we might have to put together some type of, committee to, start soliciting those individuals that was born and raised here and went off to do great things and have came back, looking for a place to, invest.
And the good thing is a lot of our high school coaches still have those connections.
Correct.
So we have started talking to our high school coaches, moving on to activities, athletic directors and principals. But the goal will be to get a committee together for each one of those sports that consists of high school, parks and rec, who will have to look at the youth leagues and look at a more comprehensive approach. Middle school's filling in that gap. And they're really excited. I wish you could hear some of the things they're saying about just the possibility of expanding sports specifically in their areas that would allow students to be more competitive.
Okay, and last one, bilingual teaching assistant. I'm sure they have to be teachers, right?
No, these teacher assistants. Just looking for members of the community in your community, because you're in the north,
right?
Who may be bilingual and may be eligible to become a teacher assistant. So these are regular teacher assistant positions, but we're looking at maybe taking a few FDs and saying, hey, why? I was recently in elementary school and we had a high number of English language learners in our dual immersion program.
Correct.
And I was told a lot of those students were kids who had tested out of English language services. So having a Spanish-speaking teacher assistant around to support instruction, because now we're having a lot of kids who are exiting the program, but they're still in math and English and other things, and just having those bilingual assistants allows them to build relationships, especially if they're members from the community who will be eligible. They don't have to have a teacher certification. They're teacher assistants, and would allow that teacher also to be better served in the classroom. So I think this is a good time to look at who we hire as teacher assistants and be more purposeful, since we are seeing a larger number of English language learners, students continue to enroll in Newport News over the past 5 to 6 years. It's time to put more bilingual staff in our buildings that can support classroom instruction.
Right, and probably we probably could start with some of the seniors, they may have extra time on their hand or whatever the case may be, that are bilingual, that understand what takes place in the classroom because they're still there until they graduate. So maybe we could tap in, who knows, maybe a volunteer call. Hey, if you got time, you're a senior or whatever the case may be, you're out of class. I don't know if they're still doing that. Do they still go home at 10 o'clock or something and they finish with classes as seniors? Do they still do that?
Senior
some class,
some have short, some have adjusted schedules based on their early release.
Right, okay.
It's early release, based on their, and hopefully we'll be able to put some of them to work in the next couple of years.
Right, correct. Yeah, and so maybe
job skill or something.
Maybe there might be some volunteers that because they might have
could be teacher assistants,
Yeah, so just one.
Or in a classroom help or a helper.
All right, so I'm done with my recommendations. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Any other questions? Yes, Dr. Best.
First of all, I would like to thank you as well, Dr. Parker, for excellent report. The budgeting process for me is one of the most overwhelming duties, being a school board member, and sometimes it makes me feel like I'm missing something because it's just so much in this book. But thank you for chunking. Well, we talked about chunking and instruction and chunking, and it made me, it helped me to understand much better. I have a comment regarding our ELL. I would like to commend Newport News, and I'm proud to be a part of Newport News and the services that we provide for our ELL students. I know there's a controversial kind of issue going on across the water, and it just, when I heard about that though, I just felt a sense of peace, and it made me feel good to be a part of this division and the services that we provide for our students. I think we talked about this in a work session, how we want to be be able to compete with surrounding districts for the starting salary. And I believe a division announced yesterday their starting salary was $51,000. Are we?
Well, I will say that this budget proposes to bring our starting salary to $50, and
Right.
that is what we have communicated in our previous presentations. I think announcing something and approving something are two different things. I think if districts go ahead and approve a budget, this board can easily come back, and we may, once our revenue picture is clear, and if you want to amend your budget, which I believe you will have to do it based on the state's budget, there will probably be an amendment, and you want to make an adjustment to that figure, that would be a great time to do so based on real information from other divisions that have an approved budget for that amount. So that's something I think we had discussed in conversation earlier. Our goal is to be the highest paying school division on the peninsula. I can't control what happens on the south side. We are the largest school division, and that is the area where we lag behind. So I believe we do need to make a formal approach to address that, whether it's in this on the 22nd or whether it will be in April with an amended budget. I believe it's time the board addressed it.
Okay. And finally, I was speaking with some residents in North Newport News last night, and one of the things that they were most excited about was middle school sports. That was the questions. So I think that's going to be a really good thing all around. And parents brought up about how kids that participate in activities that we know they're more committed to school, they do better academically, social, so they were real excited about that as well.
And I'll give Mr. Brown some kudos. He's been in my ear for the last 3 years about middle school sports, so I'm going to publicly say that, and I thank him for that because it's definitely something area where we can do some great work. In addition to middle school sports, we are engaged in our high school programs and saying, hey, what can we do to support you? And that's part of what they really are also engaged with, because we have great high school teams, and a lot of kids who give blood, sweat, and tears for Newport News to represent their schools. And we want to make sure that they have the resources also at the high school level to be competitive. So we're looking at field conditions, we're looking at their weight rooms, we're looking at any barriers that they may have to having our kids should have the best. When we look at other school divisions and what they offer for sports, we shouldn't shy away from it. We want to make sure we have the best facilities and conditions for our kids to compete, and that's what some of these discussions are turning into. So I believe, the rising tide raises all boats. We'll see Parks and Rec get more involved. We'll see our middle school programs come up, and then we'll also see our high school teams very well supported moving forward, and these are conversations that we're having right now.
Thank you, Dr. Best. Any other questions? All right. Well, then, Dr. Parker, I have just one question, and that's in that area of the compression. So we've talked about or that's been a mission ever since I've been on the board, to bring our the gap between the steps into a manageable area. About, I think it was $1,000 between steps we were targeting years back. And we thought last year we were very close. And so I want to ask this year, how close are we to compression no longer being an issue, where we can just on an annual basis just be talking about a general salary increase as opposed to making major adjustments to the steps?
After this year, the area we'll have to focus on is years 1 through 5, 0 through 5, because we'll have 6 through 31 decompressed. So that's where we'll need to focus on. So we've come a long ways from on a 31-year scale down to, and this year we're focused on years 6 through 11. They'll see the largest increase as we decompress. Last year it was 12 through 15 or 16. And this year's budget, they saw the largest raise. So it's working its way down as we decompress. And again, just for those teachers who are listening, the average raise for teachers will be 6.5%, and the ranges of raises will be in areas between 5 and 7%, depending on where you are on the employee scale.
And so potentially after next year, we could be done with the decompression
That's right.
activity. And if we maintain salary increases, we can keep the compression.
The only thing that can slow us down is if you have a year where you don't give any raises, just
Right.
a bonus or something, and that could be an factor of the economy. That caused the problem in the first place. We are looking at raising the entry scale level at the at year 0 for teachers. If that, depending on what that figure is, it may cause some compression, a little bit more compression at the lower parts of the scale. So we have to work that piece out. But I believe next year we should be provided everything, all the T's crossed and I's are dotted. We should have our full scale decompressed for employee experience at the teacher scale. We'll still be working on classified. And that's still great work we can do. As we see, that's becoming the most competitive area in terms of our employee groups.
And then just a further point of clarification on the bus drivers. The bus driver pay, what is the minimum pay going to move up to now?
So going back to that slide,
1567.
and I think I
15,
believe this will be well received.
1567. 20.
Yeah, 20.
2016 is the starting salary. 2016 is the minimum. Mid-range, year 6 to 14 experience, 2676. And then maximum, a driver with 15 plus years experience should be making 3483.
And
a maximum of 3483.
And with that $20 minimum, so we're now moved up to our bus driver pay will be at the $20 minimum. And with that, we'll still keep our signing bonuses for bus drivers going into next year.
I believe, Mr. Chairman, the recommendation from HR, if I ask them, will be to maintain that for at least a year to see our number of bus drivers go up. So what we have, we're initiating a lot of things, but we have to see them materialize into actual drivers driving buses. So I believe until we actually see those employees in our ranks, then we may phase back on that. But I think we keep those incentives. A signing bonus of $3,000.
Yes.
Referral of drivers, $2,000. And in place for current bus drivers, if they refer a driver to us, and based on these wages, they shouldn't be too hard to get a $2,000 referral, and then a $3,000 signing bonus with wages like this. I hope to see our ranks increase, and I hope I don't see our middle school parents parked around the corner to pick up their students next year, and we can get more buses on the road so our transportation schedule is worked out. Yes, sir.
All right, thank you, Dr. Parker. All right, so with that, we will now move on to matters or comments by the superintendent. So, Dr. Parker, if you want to come back, or you can do it from there.
Well, I only have 2 things I want to say. Happy International Women's Day for all the ladies. I celebrated my staff earlier today with "I'm Every Woman" by Chaka Khan. and the only other thing I'd like to say is let's continue to raise up the Menchville basketball teams, both boys and girls. Boys had a tough loss the other night by 3 points. At the end of the game, the girls are moving on and advancing to state competition, and let's wish them well. And that concludes my remarks, Mr. Chairman.
Wonderful. All right, so now we are on to matters by the school board. And we'll start with Dr. Best tonight.
Again, thank you for your report. Thank you to all of the staff for the hard work that you put into preparing for the budget. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Best. All right, Mr. Ely.
Just want to thank the staff for putting together this amazing presentation. I know a lot of hard work and time and dedication came into it. Thanks to all the board members for giving the superintendent, different input on what you wanted to see the vision for Newport News. And everybody just have a wonderful weekend.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Ely. Mr. Harris.
Sure. Thank you to the division leadership team, executive directors, superintendent budget advisory committee, and the superintendent's senior staff, and all of the employees. Appreciate all the hard work, and looking forward to continuing a good year. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Harris. All right. Ms. Amon.
Thank you, Chairman Brown. Just thank you to everyone for all the work you've put into the budget. I know in my day-to-day work, I often deal with changing laws and changing facts, and it's hard to come up with a plan with two moving targets. So I can appreciate the challenge and the frustration. But it's a good budget. I look forward to walking through the rest of this as we see what actually comes out of the state. So thank you, guys.
All right. Mr. Hunter.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, hats off to the Budgetary Committee for a job well done as usual. And follow back on Dr. Parker. Happy International Women's Day.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hunter. So I'll just say in closing, our budget process is far from over. We're in the meat of our budget season, of course, and tonight was a very important step, a milestone that we needed to pass. We've started this process early on when we had our budget retreat just a few months ago. And we now, the board, I think we all reflected, Dr. Parker, we're very appreciative of seeing the priorities that we laid out being incorporated by staff and what we were able to see tonight. What's coming next for us, for the public to know, is that next week, same time, we will be here to have the school board's public hearing on this budget. So now the public, you all have heard the budget presentation tonight. Next week, the public, you'll have a chance to come in and weigh on that. We would appreciate having you come out and speak and make your voice heard on the budget. And then, of course, March 22nd is when the board will hold our vote on this budget, and hopefully pass our budget on March 22nd. Then March 31st is when the school board will present our budget to City Council, and hopefully that will pass through. April 13th, we will have our presentation of our board, of our budget to City Council. And then hopefully, of course, July 1st, this whole thing goes into final action. So I'll just say, in terms of highlights, what I'm very excited and proud to see in our budget is getting to that $20 an hour minimum pay for our drivers. That's been a long time coming. That we've worked very hard to see that come to fruition. We got 6.5% average raise for all of our staff, and as well. We've got middle school sports coming, so we know that there's been quite a buzz in the community, and I'm really excited and proud of that. That's a major accomplishment. I think it's going to pay off big dividends. It's an investment in our youth that's going to pay dividends for many years to come. Of course, what's going to come next, so I turned the heat on for the middle school sports to get that started, is going to be adding more middle school sports, right? We already heard about tennis and golf tonight, but as well adding in that summer conditioning, because part of that is we're going to have to look in future years how we are going to support these middle school students as they want to train and get conditioned for their events during the summer, and hopefully they'll be attending summer school right at the same time, so they can come to conditioning in the morning, right, and go to summer school all afternoon, and then we've got some very productive students. So
busy kids are good.
Busy kids, exactly, and so very excited to be part of this board where every year that I've been on this board, we've passed a raise. And I like to always, say, hey, this year will be no different. When we started off this journey, that wasn't always the case. But I'm very proud that every year we've been talking about a raise, and this year will be no different. We'll continue to talk about raises, and we see that is paying dividends now in terms of that compression. So hopefully after next year, we will be almost done with the compression, and everyone will feel like they are very rewarded and respected in their position. That every year. You're looking at those step increases as you are progressing with our division and you want to stay here. And lastly, I just want to say thank you to Riverside Elementary School for providing the board with these wonderful gifts for School Board Appreciation Month. So we know that school boards are not necessarily appreciated that much. We got some criticism for us even acknowledging that there was School Board Appreciation Month at last school board's meeting. So you will take these gifts and we'll quietly take them back to our vehicles. But we just want to thank Riverside Elementary School for providing them to us. And with that, we stand adjourned.
Good job.